Hey everybody, welcome back to the Print 3D channel. Today we're going to show you step by step on how you can 3D print and assemble the Phoenix Unlimited hand from Team Unlimited for the Enable the Future project, so stick around. Hey everybody, welcome back, and thank you for joining me here on the Print 3D channel. We've got a really fun project for you guys today. We're going to show you step by step on how you can 3D print and assemble the Phoenix Unlimited hand from Team Unlimited for the Enable the Future project. We have a lot of stuff to cover, so let's head over to the computer and I'll show you the Enable the Future website and where we can download all the different files for the different types of prosthetic hands that they support. Then we'll head over to Thingiverse and we'll use their customizer to set the scale of all the parts that we need. After that, we'll bring everything into Simplify 3D for slicing before we print everything on the gMax 1.5 XT Plus. Then we'll do a little bit of post-processing on the parts before we begin assembly, which includes installing the tensioner strings and screws and how you can use your 3D printer's heated bed to do the thermoforming for the gauntlet before we install all the foam padding and the Velcro straps to wrap up the Phoenix Unlimited hand. We have a lot of stuff to cover, so let's head over to the computer and get started. Okay, so here we are on the computer and we're at enablingthefuture.org, and I'll put that link down in the description so you guys can check out their website. And the simplest way to put what these people are doing to help out the community is a global network of passionate volunteers using 3D printing to give the world a helping hand. And you can read all about what they do here under the About tab. But if you have a 3D printer and you're ready to get started, you want to go to the Get Involved tab and go down to Build a Hand. Now, I've already opened up a couple of these tabs so we can make it a little bit easier to navigate around. And if you go to the Build a Hand page, under there it'll give you a step-by-step instructions on how you can get started on participating in the Enabling the Future project. And what we're going to do is we're going to check out which design works best for your needs. And if you click on that link, it'll open up a new window and it'll give you all the different devices that are currently supported by the Enabling the Future project. Under there, we're going to go to the Phoenix hand. And under there, you're going to see there's 3 different versions. Now, there's 3 different versions because they've done modifications to make it simpler to print and for different types of people who need, for what the different types of people need for this type of device. What we're going to do is we're going to print out the Unlimited Phoenix hand. And if you click on this link, it's going to take you directly to the Thingiverse page. But before we do that, let's check out Team Unlimited because they're the ones that have designed this particular prosthetic device. They also have a couple other devices, and we'll be doing a full tutorial on some of those after we get those printed and check out the assembly of them. But here you can find out all the information about Team Unlimited, and I'll put that link down in the description as well. So if we go back over to the Phoenix hand and we click on Unlimited Phoenix, it's going to open up the Thingiverse page. And here you're going to find all the information that's current about this particular design and all the different things you need to know about this particular design too. And there's more information, of course, and I'll get to that in a few seconds. But what we're going to do is we're going to scale ours to 120% and we're going to print out the right hand. Now to do that, you need to use the Thingiverse customizer. Now you're going to need a Thingiverse account to do this because once all the files are done processing, they're going to go into your My Things area, and we'll get to that in a second. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to open up this particular file in Customizer. So if you just click on Open in Customizer, it'll take a few seconds because it needs to load up all the models in a web-based version of a 3D software customizer, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So what we're going to do is when you get into the Customizer, you can see the model that we're working on and the different parameters there for each model. Now if you click on Part under this drop-down menu, these are all the different parts that we're going to need to use through the customizer to scale up to 120%. And of course, you pick the left or right hand, and we're going to do the right hand. And then this is your scale parameter, and you just slide the slider down to whichever parameter you need. And for our purposes, we're going to use 120%. Now what's going to happen is we're going to go through each one of these parts, and we're going to have to create a thing. After that, it's going to go into the queue, which will then use the customizer's built-in web interface to scale the files up properly. That way all the pins fit properly and everything is scaled properly through the customizer. Then they'll publish them under your My Things page, and that's where we'll go to download our files. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is create all the files. Now this is a very time-consuming process, but it's worth the effort because you're going to get perfectly scaled parts using the Thingiverse customizer. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the palm. We're going to make sure it's set for right and 120%. Now there's a 3-step process to do this. You're going to hit create a thing, and you're going to want to give it a name. And for this, what we're going to do is we're going to call it the Unlimited Phoenix hand, because I have a lot of files already in my things area, and we're going to call this assembly. Now this will give us a Thingiverse page that compiles all the files into one place. If you change the name here under name, it's going to start compiling them in different Thingiverse pages. You want them all in one page. Now I believe there's a little bit of a bug that actually generates a page for each item containing all the files, with the very first item being the one you're generating currently. But that's probably something they'll have to work out. If you want to publish this publicly, you want to hit Publish New Thing. We don't want to do that because we're using this as for our own purposes. Now when you're all done and you take pictures and you're really proud of your work and everything is scaled properly, you can publish your thing through the Edit the Thing page in the My Things area, but we can get to that in a second. Now if you're going to go offline for any reason and you need it to email, you can just click on this button. So we hit Create a Thing, and it's going to open up yet another window, and it's going to say My Customized Thing. Now we did use it proper naming, and we know that it's going to do that. And if you want to open up the queue in another window, you hit Command or Control, go to My Queue, and as you can see, that opened up a new tab that's going to open up our MakerBot queue, and we just hit Return to Customizer. Now it's going to start generating that file in the background. So we're going to have to go through each one of these, make sure it's right, 120, 3-stage process, it's the assembly, Return to Customizer, tension pins, right, 120, create thing, create thing. It's going to take a second, or maybe it didn't. Let's try that again. Create thing, create thing. There it goes. It's Thingiverse, and it is a web-based system, so it may take a second to do this. And we may get ahead of it, too. We're going to do the fingers next. Maybe we should wait for the preview to pop up. In the meantime, we'll make sure we check right, and it's 120. Create thing. Still going to our same publishable, non-published thing. Return to Customizer. We want to do these are called the phalanx, and these are the middle segments or knuckle segments. Right, 120. Create a thing. Create a thing. Return to Customizer. We're going to do the pins. Now, the pins are set up in a full build plate with all the pins you're going to need for the assembly, which is really nice. Right, 120. Create a thing. Create a thing. Return to Customizer. So we'll let that sit for a second, and then we'll go to the gauntlet. Now this is what we're going to thermoform using the heated bed of the 3D printer. Right hand, 120, create a thing, return to Customizer. And finally, the jig, or the template. And this is what we're going to take our thermoformed, warmed piece of plastic and form over this. And like I said, I've already printed one of these, and I use it quite often for the different tests that I've done, because I printed quite a few of these. So we're going to go ahead and go through the process so it's in our folder full of files. Right, 120, create a thing, return to Customizer. So now that we have everything into the queue, we should be able to go to the queue and see all of our files. The next thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to go to our My Things page. Now I have all this open, and there's mine, and I'll go ahead and hit refresh. Now it should bring up, okay, so it did it again. It did the same thing it does all the time, even though we specified a certain folder. If I click on this, and this may take a few seconds because we just generated all these things. If we go back, maybe if we click on one of these earlier ones, it'll show it. So we'll go to 3 minutes ago. So yeah, it did the same thing. It creates all the files in one general area. So this is where this is where we would download all of our things at once. Now, like I said, if you want to make this public, you just go to Edit the Thing, put up some pictures of your final printed and assembled hand, and then publish it, and make sure you link it back over to the original page. So if we go here to download all of our files, it's going to download them into our downloads folder. So we'll go ahead and do that. And it's doing what it needs to do. And we'll close our little downloads, and that part of this process is done. So once we have all of our files downloaded and printed, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start our assembly. And now the assembly is actually really easy. And here's a really good exploded view, and I'll put this link down in the description, of how to assemble the hand. And as you can see, it is the right hand too, so it's going to be exactly what we're assembling. And there's also another PDF from the Enable community, which has the full assembly instructions. And I keep this handy just in case I need it. It's something that has all the templates for the foam, which are super important. We'll talk about that once we get to that part. If you have a printer, a regular 2D printer, I would suggest printing this out, because when you need these templates for cutting out the foam pieces, these have already been properly scaled. So that's one thing that'll help you build your hand, along with this exploded view, which also has a step-by-step, but I think this is the most important part, because this gives you exactly what we're going to do today. Once you have all the parts ready and you're going to assemble your hand, you're going to need the needed bits and pieces to do the assembly. Now there's two places online that you can get them, and the first place is Matter Hackers. They carry, for the Raptor Reloaded hand, they carry the assembly kit, and if you don't want to build a hand or print a hand, you can also do a sponsorship, and that's a really cool option if you just want to participate. If you want to get the kits to build the Phoenix Unlimited hand, you have to go to 3D Universe. Now hopefully Matter Hackers will carry the Phoenix Unlimited hand kit soon, but this is the place you can get them. You can also buy the parts separately. On the Enabling the Future website, there is an area where it gives you a list of all the different parts you're going to need, and I'll put that page link in the description, and it shows you where you can buy a lot of this stuff online at Amazon and a couple of different retailers. But this is one of the places, and again, I'll put these links, Matter Hackers and 3D Universe, down in the description, so you guys can buy the needed bits that you need to do your final assembly of the Enable project hand that you are printing, and in this case, it's the Phoenix Team Unlimited hand. So let's head over to Simplify 3D, and I'll show you how we set up our build plates, and we'll get everything printed. All right, so now that we have everything scaled through the customizer in Thingiverse to 120% scale, let's bring everything over into Simplify 3D for slicing. Now we're going to set up 3 different build plates, because we're going to use 2 different kinds of filament, or 2 different colors of filament. We're going to use red and blue. That way we give a little bit of contrast during the assembly. The first build plate we're going to set up is the blue parts, and we're going to do the fingertips, all the pins, and we're going to do the tensioner block and all the little tensioner blocks that go inside the tensioner block. So let's grab our parts that we downloaded from Thingiverse, and I have them over here on my other monitor, so I'll grab all the parts that I need, the pins, the tension block, and we'll grab the fingers. And we'll drag them over into Simplify 3D, and it'll place them automatically on the build plate. Now the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to probably instinctively want to put some support material on it. Now these do print without support material, and I printed quite a few of these, but the advantage would be to turn the parts towards your cooling fan where they get the best cooling, whether it be from the right side or from the back or from the left or from the front. On the gMax printers, they all come from the right side as really the best cooling that I've found printing. So I like to turn all my models towards the right. So I'll double click on these, and we'll do a minus 90 degrees, and then we'll go ahead and do center and arrange again, and it's going to rearrange the parts. Now we're going to go ahead and move these around. Now if you just click on them and hold down your Command or Control key, you can easily move the parts. And I like to go to the top view, and if you go to these quick views, and then just scroll wheel mouse in, use your right mouse button to kind of click and drag over. And you can learn how to use Simplify 3D in plenty of tutorials, but I like to move quick, and if I don't tell you the commands, I'm sorry. But anyway, what you want to do is you want to group all your parts together in one central area. Now the first thing you're going to notice is that all these parts are separated except for the parts for the pins, and that's because that's how they come from the customizer. And now that we have these turned towards the cooling, which is the best cooling on the gMax, we're ready to start slicing. So let's go ahead and check out my process settings, and you can see the settings that are required from the Enable the Future project for printing these. Now these are my basic settings in Simplify 3D, but what we need to pay attention to is 2 different areas: is the layer height, which they suggest at a 0.2 millimeter layer height, and you can see I have 4 top layers and 4 bottom layers and 3 perimeters. And my first layer setting to get better bed adhesion is at 110% on the height and width, and I also slow down my first layer speed to 75% of whatever my printing speed is. The next thing you're going to want to pay attention to is infill. In this case, they want us to use around 35 or 35% or more infill. Now I'm using 35, and I'm using the fast honeycomb. One of the other things you want to pay attention to is your print speed, because you're printing a lot of really small parts, and depending on how fast you go, you may have some problems and the parts may pop off the print bed. So you may want to slow it down to a reasonable speed, not too fast. Another advantage of Simplify 3D is under the Advanced tab, under the thin wall behavior, because these have some thin walls, is you allow single extrusion fill on the inner thin wall types, and you're going to see how this makes a difference when I slice the files. So let's go ahead and hit OK, and let's hit Prepare to Print, and I'll show you how this slices, and it should go pretty quick. So here's our sliced model. And as you can see, if I dial it back down to the very first layer, that there are some areas, like right here on this pin, that don't print immediately because these are custom designed through the customizer, and these were all hand-designed pieces. So there might be some variation in them. And over here on the fingertips, there's a little gap in between. Now I'm going to show you how to fix that and not ruin the model or make the model not functional using the already sized parts. And the simplest way to do that is to separate the connected surfaces. So if you go under Mesh, separate connected surfaces, and you take these two parts and you lower them one layer height into the build plate. Double click, Z offset, -0.2 because that's our layer height, and that'll drop that down one layer. And we'll do the same for this part, just one layer, -0.2. And for this pin, because we noticed that there was a part of it that wasn't quite complete in the slice. Now, depending on the slicer you use, those parts may come out a little bit differently, but I'm using Simplify 3D. So if we hit Prepare to Print now, you can see that all the parts are on the print bed perfectly. Now, what we could do is we could double click on this, and we could separate the connected surfaces on this one as well. We could set this back to 0, click on Done, and we have it selected. We go to Mesh, Separate Connected Surfaces. Now, this is going to create a whole bunch of files that aren't named properly. So if that's the way you want to do it, you can do it. If you just click on another part and click on just the part we want to lower, we can double click again. We'll do a -0.2 because that's the layer height that we're going to do. And we can leave all the other parts the way they were because they were getting good bed adhesion. We'll do our slice. And as you can see, if I dial it back down to layer 1, make sure we're on layer 1, that all the parts have at least one layer connecting to the build plate, including those fingers there. Now, if I turn off that gap fill feature, which I'll do here real quick, which is a really great feature, and just do perimeters only, and hit Prepare to Print, you'll see a difference in that first layer. As you can see, there's some areas that don't get filled in, and those could cause some bed adhesion problems, especially on those fingers. So if you're using Simplify 3D, make sure you check on Allow Single Extrusion Fill. That's the one that works the best. If you do gap fill, sometimes it'll do an infill pattern, and it could pop the part off the print bed. So we'll go ahead and Prepare to Print again real quickly here so you can see the difference again. We'll dial it back down to layer 1, and as you can see, it's filled in a lot of those gaps. So these are going to be the parts that we're going to print in blue. So once this is all set, we have already sliced it, you can save the G-code file to your SD card or to your desktop. So we'll do a Select All, and we'll delete. And now we'll bring over the red parts that we're going to print. Now we're going to print the gauntlet and the phalanx, and these are the knuckle parts. We're also going to print the palm part separately too, because I like to address that with a little bit of different cooling. And I want to make this easier for printers that have a smaller build plate than the gMax. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these parts because, again, it has to achieve the best cooling, -90 degrees. And then I'm going to do Center and Arrange. And it's going to arrange these on the build plate in a perfect position. Now, I may want to turn this one just so it aligns up a little bit differently. And I may want to move this over here. You know, it's up to you how you want to position them, depending on how good your cooling is. So we can rotate this 90 degrees. And if you do Center and Arrange, it's going to rearrange those parts anyway. So once you have everything set up on your build plate, again, you just hit Prepare to Print. And as you can see on this one, we'll dial it back down to the first layer, and we're getting really good bed adhesion. All the parts are equally touching the build plate, and of course our gauntlet, which we're going to thermoform on the heated bed, that's perfect, of course. So we'll save off this G-code to the desktop or our SD card before we send it over the printer. Now the last thing we're going to put over here, and I'm going to show you, is the palm part. Now we can also show you the template and jig too, but I want to show you how this sets up on the printer as well. Because this is another part that you may look at and say, I want to put support material in here. But it would be a little bit of a nightmare to clean it out. So I would suggest, again, pointing this towards your fan. In this case, mine is to the right. That way you get optimum cooling in the area. Because if we slice this model, and I'll show you how it slices, all of this prints with a combination of bridges and just very, very good geometry. It's set up because there's some internal tunnels in here too, where your tension strings are going to go. So if I dial this back, you can see that in the middle here on the palm, this is a integrated palm piece, and a lot of them have one that you can screw in. On this particular model, it's integrated, which is very nice. But if we go all the way down towards the top here, you can see that there is some serious overhangs, and then it does a really huge bridge. and it finishes those tunnels. So it's very important that these tunnels are intact because this is where the tensioner strings are going to go. So again, you may be tempted to put support material in there, but I printed quite a few of these without any support material. I did have a few overhang problems, but they're easy to clip or sand out, and it's easier to do that than have to go in and sand the entire thing and cause some damage, or leave some parts in there that could pierce through the foam plastic or the foam inserts into the recipient's hand. So you're better off going without support material. So again, these are the exact same settings that we did for the other parts, 0.2 millimeter at layer height with 35% infill. Again, we're using that allow single extrusion fill to really give us a little bit of extra plastic where we need it, especially in this integrated palm piece. So we'll go ahead and save off the G-code for these files, and we'll put them on our SD card, and we'll head over to the gMax and get these parts printing. With everything sliced in Simplify 3D, we then printed everything out on the gMax 1.5 XT Plus using AMZ's 3D filament. We used two different colors too. We used their red and their blue. That way it'd have a little bit of contrast showing the assembly of the Phoenix Unlimited hand. All the parts were printed at a 0.2 millimeter layer height with 35% infill as suggested by the Enable team, and all the prints turned out really good. I'm super happy with the results. Now we're going to do a little bit of minor cleanup and we'll start the assembly. And one thing to note, the 3D Universe assembly package that I purchased to do the original Phoenix Unlimited hand, I've used most of the supplies. I've gone onto the Enable site, and I'll put these links down in the description, where you can buy qualified items to help assemble the hand if you don't want to buy the kit from 3D Universe or from Matter Hackers. And I've purchased a lot of that stuff, so I have a lot of supplies on hand, including the 100-pound test tri-weave nylon fishing line, which is super handy to have a full roll of that because you're only using about 3 18-inch lengths. Also included in the 3D Universe package were 2 packages of the dental bands that you need for the fingers. There's plenty of them in the pack to assemble quite a few hands, so I didn't need to purchase any more of those. I also used up the screws that were included in the 3D Universe pack for the 120% scale, but I was able to match those exact same size screws at my local hardware store, and I'll put that size down in the description. If you're building the 120% scale, you'll be able to get those as well. And to speed up the process of using the super glue, you might want to have a bottle of the super glue accelerator, and I'll put that link down in the description as well. And I did use up the foam and the Velcro straps for the original print that I did, but I'll be able to show you how to cut out a piece of foam and insert it into the hand, and also how to attach the Velcro strips as well. And then finally, I'll show you how to use your 3D printer's heated bed to do the thermoforming for the gauntlet. And it's a super easy process, and it'll only take a few minutes. So we have a lot of things to cover for the assembly, so let's get started. Okay, so the first part of the assembly is going to be the fingers, and the first thing we'll start with is the thumb. Now there's a PDF that I'm going to show right now that'll give you a good exploded view of the Phoenix Unlimited hand. It'll show you how everything fits together and which pieces go where. Something important to note is that the fingers come in 2 different sizes. There's long ones and short ones. You want to use the short ones on the outer fingers and the long ones on the inner fingers, and of course the thumb is its own size. So let's get started with assembling the thumb. One thing to note when you're assembling the parts is that these go together a specific way because you have to be able to fit in the dental bands to create the tension for the fingers. So make sure that you align these properly. Also note there's also a square hole in here, which is basically your key. On each of the clips and each of the little pins, the compression pins, there's a square end, so you'll know which end goes in which where. So for the thumbs, there's 2 sets. There's a long one and a short one. And the first one we're going to use is the short one, and they should slide in nice and easy. If you do have to use any cleanup, I would suggest getting yourself a set of round files. These are super handy for cleaning up 3D prints. So that gives us our thumb assembly. So let's go ahead and set that aside, and let's do the next finger. And again, make sure that you put these in a specific order because you're going to want to remember which one is which. Meaning that you're going to want to make sure that the shorter fingers are on the outside for the index and pinky finger, and the longer fingers are the middle and ring finger. And again, make sure you line up these pieces here on the top because that's where you're going to be putting the dental bands. So the next set of pins we're going to use, there's 4 in their set. And these 4 are specifically for the tip of the finger joint. And again, they're keyed with a square, and they should just drop in nicely and give you full rotation movement. Let's go ahead and set up the next finger. Again, making sure that we're set up for the dental band, and we're using the square keyed part of the pin. Now, if these go in a little bit difficult, you can also use a pair of pliers to kind of snap them into place. But I haven't had any trouble with them. As long as your printer is pretty dialed in, they should snap together pretty easily. Let's go ahead and do the ring finger. And again, we want to make sure that we have this set up so we can insert our dental bands. And we'll drop in our pin. And a full range of movement, and we'll do the pinky finger last. And again, making sure that we're using the square line-up pin to set this up together. And again, if you're having any trouble, you can use a pair of pliers, but like I said, I haven't had any trouble assembling these so far. All the prints turn out pretty clean, as long as your printer is dialed in. So now that we have the fingers assembled, let's go ahead and attach them to the palm assembly. Now there's 4 different pins you're going to use. The short stubby one that's part of the thumb collection, which is this one. And again, refer to that PDF that I showed, and I'll bring it up again real quick here so you guys can see it. This shows the exploded view of the Phoenix hand. It's super handy to keep around. If you have a printer, print one out and keep it handy when you're doing your assembly, and you can use it to follow along with this video. So what we're going to do is we're going to attach the thumb. Now the thumb goes in the same as all the other pieces. There is a pin with a square on the end, and you just drop it in. And it should line up pretty easily and snap into place. Next, we'll start assembling on the fingers. Again, it doesn't matter which side you have facing up, as long as you put them in order, which again, short, long, long, short. So we'll grab one of the short fingers, which is the index finger. Now we're going to use the longer of the pins that are left over, the 3 pins that are left over, because this is going to attach 2 of the fingers. So we'll go ahead and push this in. And if you need to clean it up, make sure you use your little round file. You don't want to push this in all the way because it's going to attach to the next finger as well. So we'll slide that in, and we'll push this all the way through, and that gives us our first 2 fingers. We'll grab our middle finger, and there's 2 leftover pins. They're exactly the same. Again, we have a keyed square insert. We'll drop our pin in, make sure the finger lines up nicely, snap that into place. And finally, the pinky finger with our last pin. And there we go. So all 5 fingers are attached, or all 4 fingers and the thumb are now attached to the palm. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set up the 3D printer. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the template provided, or the jig provided, and we're going to thermoform this piece onto it. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the heated bed of a 3D printer to warm it up so we can make it pliable, and then we'll bend it over onto our form, and then we can continue on with the construction, which includes attaching the tension block and the tension rods, and of course attaching the palm or the gauntlet to the palm itself, which will go here, and we have pins and a small wheel for that. So let's go ahead and set up the 3D printer, and we'll warm up our gauntlet piece, and we'll get it formed over our template jig. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use the heated bed platform of a 3D printer to thermoform our gauntlet piece onto our template. And we have a 3D printer with just the bed warming up. We set it for 70 degrees C. It's now at 65. I think I'm going to go ahead and put our piece down there so it starts to soften up a little bit. And this is really cool that they provided this little template or jig to use for thermal forming your plastic. Now there's other methods you can do. You can put this in warm water for a little while and thermal form it. I've had some bad experiences with the warm water aspect because it doesn't seem like the warmth of the water penetrates all the way into the plastic and really makes it so you only have a few seconds. But using the heated bed platform of a 3D printer gives you a nice hot surface to work with, and it'll make the plastic nice and soft and pliable. So it's been sitting on here for a few seconds, so we're going to go ahead and let it sit, and we'll get back to it in a second. All right, well, it's been sitting on there for a few minutes. Let's go ahead and see how soft it is. Well, it's almost there, so let's go ahead and let it sit for a little while longer and make sure it gets nice and soft, so we'll be able to form it over the template. Okay, so it's been about another minute, and you'll notice if you're watching it from the angle, if you're sitting in front of the printer, that the pieces will start to sag if it has any curling on it. So let's go ahead and see how we're doing. Okay, we're almost there. That's pretty pliable. So I'm going to go ahead and get this ready. And you really only have one shot at this, so you have to really be careful and make sure that you get the plastic from the heat source onto the template as quickly as possible and form it down on there. The main point being that the 2 holes for your pins need to be on the 2 pins from the template. So I think this is about ready. Let's see. You know what? I'm going to give it another second here, another couple of seconds, and then we'll go ahead and form it on there. Okay, so that's been another minute, so let's go ahead and carefully get this ready to form. So like I said, you have to move somewhat quick. You don't want to put any pressure on this area because this is where the tension block is going to slide up. You just want to make sure that the 2 holes for the pins line up on the pins on the template. And of course, the Velcro strap holes should be fine. You may need to clean those up later, but they should align perfectly as long as you form it properly over the template. So now that this thing is nice and soft, let's go ahead and get it on there. You just want to form it on there nice and quickly, because it will stiffen up pretty quick. And then just hold it on there for a few seconds and let it cool off, and you should be ready to go. Okay, so we can go ahead and turn off the heated bed for the 3D printer and let that cool off, and this is ready to go. And as you can see, we had a good thermal form and the pins lined up real nice, and we're going to let this cool off, and then we'll pop it off the template, and then we'll continue with the hand assembly. Okay, so we've got our thermal forming done, and that turned out perfectly. I'm really happy with the way this turned out. We just have to remove it from the template and do that carefully so we don't break anything. And we are going to save this because we'll need it again if we ever want to assemble more prosthetic devices using that exact same scale and that same model, which we probably will. So I'll set that aside. The next thing we want to do is we want to attach the thermoform gauntlet to the palm. Now we'll be using the last of the 2 pins, which are these 2 blue ones. And I did reprint, like I said when we were in Simplify 3D, I did reprint the red wheels, so we had a little bit of a color combination here. So what we're going to do is on the inside of the gauntlet, as you can see, there are more square keys for our square pegs to line up with. It makes it easier to put everything together. So what we're going to do is just we're going to put these 2 together. And again, the wheels are going to go on the outside, so you just want to maneuver this until you can see where you need to put the pins. Make sure you line everything up. And the pins should just snap right in. There we go. We'll put them all the way through because we're going to put the wheels on. Let's do the other side. And sorry if I'm shaking the cameras because I have the second camera there on a smaller tripod on the table where we're working, so it might shake a little bit. So there we go. Snap it through. And then we just want to put our wheels on. And snap those right onto the pins. Do both sides. And there we go. So now we have our thermal formed gauntlet attached to the palm. So the next step that we want to do is we want to put our dental bands on before we put on our tensioner block. And we have those here. So we're just going to move those aside for a second. And we're going to put on our dental bands. Now there's 2 different sizes of dental bands. There's a large one and a small one. Now the 5/16 or the larger ones, they're going to go on the fingertip areas, and the smaller ones, they're going to go up here near the knuckles. So we'll go ahead and we'll take out 5 because we're going to need 5. I already have 1 out, so we'll take out 4. And like I said, they do, if you buy the kit from 3D Universe, you're going to get quite a lot of these, so you'll be able to assemble quite a few hands. So we'll just shake out the 5 that we need, or 4 I should say. Oops, 1 extra. Just put that away. And again, these are non-latex because you want to make sure that you don't have any kind of latex, because a lot of people have latex allergies. Now the easiest way I found to put these in is to use a pair of tweezers. Now you can get, I think it's a 4-pack or a 5-pack of really cool sets of tweezers from Harbor Freight in one package. And you want the ones with a little angle on them because that'll make it a lot easier. And what you do is you just maneuver these in. What I like to do is just push down the first end, down through the groove, and wrap it around. And then just pull out the tweezer. And there you go. It's really that simple. Now, since you have a lot of these dental bands in the bag that they give you, if you happen to break one during the insertion process, it's not a big deal. And you'll notice that the latex is very thin, but it is very strong because these are designed for orthodontic use. So they're designed for people with braces. So we'll go ahead and put in our longer ones. And again, the links for everything that we use, all the parts that we use, outside of the 3D Universe pack will be down in the description. Now I haven't found these dental bands, but I'm definitely going to track them down because these are handy. Even though I do have a full bag of these, I'm pretty sure that I will need some of these in the future because they are super handy to have for these prosthetic devices. So there's the fingers. So we'll go ahead and put the thumb one on. Make sure you guys can see that. Let's flip it around here. There we go. And again, just find a place for it, push it down into the slot, and then just take the other end and pull it around. And then just pull out your tweezers, or whatever device you're going to use. Okay, so now we have all the large bands installed, and you can see that adds tension to the fingers. Now we'll insert the small ones, so we'll use the 1/4 inch, the smaller bands. And I've already got one out, so we only need 4. So we'll just shake out 4. Set those aside. Same method here, just grab your tweezers and push the finger parts together and slide it down into the groove. Now these may take a little bit of effort because the slots in the front are a little bit tighter because you don't want these bands to pop out. And there is a little bit of a lip underneath this part here. So if you push it down even further, it'll grab underneath that lip to prevent it from popping out. And once the hand starts to work a little bit, these will work down in. And they may twist around, so it's nice to have these tweezers. So go ahead and put the next band on. Same method. We'll push it down into the groove, wrap it around the other post, and then just make sure that it goes down into that little smaller slot. Oop. There we go. Again, these tweezers are super handy for this kind of assembly work, and they're really good for pulling off the cleaning off your nozzle during a 3D print too, because they have that nice angle in it, able to get right in there and grab whatever filament is gathered up around the nozzle. You don't really want to use any sharp objects around these bands either. You want to make sure you're using something that doesn't have a really sharp edge to it, because you don't want to clip the band either. Now I haven't clipped any, but it could happen. So we'll go ahead and put this last finger band on. Now there's a couple different ways. You just figure out which method works best for you. But like I said, if you push it down into one end and then wrap it around the other, it gives you a little bit of tension. And then you can just push it in with your finger, or you can use the tweezers to give yourself a little bit of an assist. Okay, so we've got our finger tension, so we'll just do our thumb. Oop, pop right out. So make sure that gets in there. And make sure it goes all the way into the groove. That way it doesn't roll out and pop up. There we go. And again, don't want to use any sharp objects because these are just non-latex rubber bands and they will cut easily. So that gives us the full movement on all of our fingers. So that's the process with the dental bands. The next step we want to do is we want to install our tensioner block and our screws, because now we're going to do the stringing of all the fingers. So let's go ahead and install our tensioner block. Now, if you have any difficulty with the print on this because of the layer change, depending on where your layer change is, just run a set of files. Now, again, I did suggest purchasing a set of these files to have around. This one's triangular, and it fit right in that groove for cleanup. I just want to make sure. And you want to make sure that you are, with the square holes are facing towards the hand. Square holes are facing, because you have this little nub here that's going to attach to that snaps it into place once it's all connected. So just make sure that we push that all the way forward. There we go. We're locked into place. And then we want to put each of our little tensioner pins into the square slots. These should all fit nice and snug, because you want to be able to have the string areas out in the front here. Now I'm just looking to test fit them, make sure they all fit in there nicely. Because then we're going to take our screws and we're going to put them through this side, and that's going to apply the tension. Now the first thing we're going to string up is going to be the thumb, because that's going to provide, that one's the easiest to do, and it'll set up a little bit of tension for the 30-degree angle. And let me explain what that means after I pull these pins out real quick. Once the hand is ready to be strung up and all the tension is put onto it, what you want to do is you want to make sure that this is at about 30 degrees before you attach and tie your knots for all the fingers. So what I found the easiest thing to do is to do the thumb first and set that angle so you have it already set up, and that'll make it much easier to do the other fingers. Now I have a little setup that I have created, and you'll probably have to figure out some sort of way to do this on your own, but I'll give you a couple of good hints that'll help out on the way to do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to string up the thumb first, and we'll install the tensioner pin and the screw, and that'll give us our 30-degree angle. The reason why you want to do that is you want to have enough tension to pull these fingers into the hand position. And they have designated in the instructions that a 30-degree angle, about 30 degrees, is the perfect tension for the strings. So when the recipient bends the wrist, the fingers turn and they're nice and tight and tense. So let's go ahead and set up the thumb, and we'll get our angle, our approximately 30-degree angle set up. Okay, with the tensioner block installed, I have our tension strings, which are 100-pound test fishing line, and the link is down in the description where you can purchase this separately if you run out of it from the 3D Universe kit, just as I have. And this is actually one of the qualified, or I guess they would call vetted, suppliers of this 100-pound test line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to string up the thumb, and we'll go ahead and get this set up. Now, I did do a little bit of cleanup on the tunnels because I was having some trouble getting the strings in during the test fit. So what we're going to do is, the first one we're going to do is we're going to go through the top here, and you just kind of want to push it through until you see the string. There we go. And that's why I cut these 18-inch lengths too, because I wanted to give myself a little bit of extra string to tie the knots. So we'll go ahead and push it through the top one, and this one will come out the bottom, hopefully, if we did enough cleanup. I just want to push it through. Oops. Twist it up here. There it is. So we have it through our main tunnel. And like I said, these are the tunnels that are going to go tie the tensioner strings to the tensioner block. So let's just move this out of the way, and let's finish up with the thumb. And again, you want to run the tensioner string through the thumb underneath the piece there. So we'll just twist the end a little bit here, and we will guide it underneath there. And depending on how clean your printer is, these parts should be fairly clean. And if you need any help, those tweezers are going to come in handy again here. So grab the string, pull it through, and this is where we're going to tie our first knot. So let's go ahead and push this through the thumb, and we'll grab our string if we can. There we go. So our first knot will be here. So we don't have to worry about the angle or the tension or anything on this one. We just want to make sure we leave a little bit of thread, or a lot of thread, depending on how well you tie knots, so you can have enough room to tie the knot in the tensioner block. So we'll go ahead and tie our first knot. And I'm just doing a simple knot here because we are going to use the super glue to ensure that this is all tight and ready to go. So we'll just tie our first knot. Hopefully you guys can see the string. And we'll make sure that knot goes right down to the bar. And that's where we want it to be, because that's where we're going to apply our super glue. We'll do this nice and tight, and we'll go ahead and tie our next knot. I like to do like 4 of these and give us enough real estate for the knot to take on some super glue and attach itself to the plastic. So we'll go ahead and tie a second, tie it nice and tight. And again, this is 100-pound fishing test, so you're not going to break it with your fingers, I guarantee you. Unless you're super, super strong, I couldn't cut this stuff with a really sharp knife. So you have to be really strong to be able to break this. So we'll get our 4th knot. All right, so that's in place. So now we can pull this string through. And that's going to provide the tension for the thumb. Now you can just roll the knot around for aesthetic purposes or whatever you want to do. Just make sure it's nice and tight. You can pull it through on both sides. Because again, you're not going to break the knot. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and apply our super glue to this first knot and make sure that that's nice and tight before we start on our second knot, which is in the second part of the thumb. So I'm going to be using just good old Gorilla Gel Glue, and I also have my accelerant. That'll make things faster. Now you might want to cut yourself out a nice little template here to control where the glue accelerant goes. Now I know that this stuff doesn't leave marks or anything, but I just don't want it spraying everywhere. So once I get the glue set up, I can just right through the little window right where I want it to go. So I have that handy, so you can cut yourself out a little piece of cardboard and that'll help. So let's go ahead and apply some glue to that knot. And again, we are using gel glue, so it's manageable and it doesn't go everywhere. I found this to be a lot easier than the liquid stuff. So we'll put a nice blob on there. Make sure we touch some of the plastic and we cover that knot. There we go. That should be a good application. Make sure you cover this up because you're going to be using the accelerator. So I'll go ahead and grab our accelerator. Grab our little window. Do a quick little spray, and I can see it activating. Move this out of the way. And this one actually has a pleasant smell to it. I believe it smells like strawberries. Cover that up. Let that sit for a minute. And it'll only take a second because it's super, super fast. So that's that's already set up. So we'll go ahead and flip this over so we can set up our knot and our tension block. And again, this is where we're going to be setting our 30-degree angle. So what I've done, what I found works really good for me, is I have a plastic box of tools and my calipers, my caliper case, and that is perfect height so the thumb is out of the way. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and grab our tensioner pins, slide this one in, this is for the thumb, and then we'll go ahead and get this started. Now you want to leave enough room for the tensioner screw to adjust this. So what I like to do is get this all the way in to leave about half the block showing, and push this forward, and it'll start to bite into the plastic. You'll feel it grab. There it goes. And leave a little bit out, just so we have a little bit so we can apply our tension. So we'll go ahead and tie our knot for the thumb. In the same process here, we're going to tie about 4 knots. There's our string. And we'll go ahead and tie our knots. So when we tie our first knot, we're going to put this on the proper angle. And what I found that works really good too, is using the jig, the template. So once we get a knot ready, let's make sure we're tying the proper knot. So once we get that ready, slide this under, and that gives us approximately 30 degrees. So now we just have to hold everything and make sure that rolls around to the front there and pull that super, super tight. Again, this 100-pound test, as you can see, there's no way I'm going to break that. And that gives us our set angle for all the other fingers. So let's go ahead and finish up the thumb knot, and then we'll get it glued. And we'll leave our template in place while we tie our last few knots and before we do our super gluing. I like to leave it there, that way it tries to keep at least close to that 30-degree angle. Now, with the tensioner screws and the amount of extra tension that we have left, we'll be able to tighten these up even more. So let's pull this nice and tight. That's why I left out half the block and I didn't put the screw in all the way. So our 4th knot. Okay, so there's our 4th knot. So we'll go ahead and do the same thing. Let's get our super glue. And we'll glue up our knot. A little liberal amount on there because we want it to touch the plastic and make sure it soaks into the nylon thread because there's multiple threads there. We'll grab our accelerator and our little guide so we don't get accelerant everywhere. Let's see which works the best. It looks like that's going to work the best. And we'll just do a quick, and there we go. That'll just take a second to set up, and then the thumb is done. And we'll trim off our excess wires, and I'll show you how the tension works. So while that sets up, we can go ahead and trim off our excess string. As you can see, there's tension there. We'll remove our template block, and that's staying in place. And we're going to use this while we're working. So you can actually keep this here if you want, and you can tape it down, and however you make your little template to keep everything at that 30-degree angle, however you choose to do that, you want to make sure that's consistent. So that's already dry. So we can go ahead and move these out of the way momentarily, and I can show you that There's our first tension string all set up. So let's go ahead and trim off the slack. And again, you're going to need some really, really sharp scissors. And I've found the best way to do it is if you don't have really sharp is to do that. Just kind of drag the blade along. And we'll clean up those other little stumps later of the string. There we go. Now, if you do have some long pieces, you might want to keep them because this stuff is super strong and it may come in handy for smaller devices. So now that we have our thumb set up and the tension is good, we can go ahead and string up the rest of the fingers. Now for the strings for the fingers, we're doing a little bit different configuration than the Phoenix hand from Enabling the Future. What you want to do is refer to the Thingiverse link, which is down in the description. And on that Thingiverse page, on the very first page there, if you scroll down, there's an X-ray view that shows how the strings for this particular tensioner block and the way this is set up are going to run. Basically, what's going to happen is since we only have 2 more tensioner blocks and 4 sets of fingers, each one of these blocks is going to tension 2 fingers. So what we'll do is we'll string on the backside and glue up through the tunnel, around through the tensioner pin, and then back down for the index finger. And we'll do that the same for the pinky and for the ring finger. So let's go ahead and run the lines. That way they are already run into our system. And again, this could take a few moments, so bear with me. And the easiest thing to do, I found the easiest thing to do because we've already installed the thumb, is to actually attack it from the front instead of trying to go through here. So since we're going to go with the index finger first, let's go ahead and push that line through. And again, if you need to do any cleanup, just make sure you use a round file. And you don't want to leave too much debris behind, so let's go ahead and make sure all of our openings are clear of any strings or anything. That should do it. And then let's go ahead and twist up the end here. And this should slide right in. Yep, there it goes. And this is why I cut 18-inch lengths too, so you would have plenty of room because when we're doing these 2 fingers, you're going to need it. So now that we have it run through the first tunnel, we'll go through between the fingers. And that goes right through here and comes out there. So we'll grab our tweezers, we'll tack this, put it on the side. There's our string. And then it's going to go underneath these and then through that loop, and that's where we're going to tie and glue. So let's go ahead and string this up through the top part of the finger, or the lower part of the finger. And again, these tweezers are super handy to have because of their angled tip to be able to reach in and grab all the parts. Okay. Okay. Now this part is going to go back through the tunnel and through our tensioner block. So let's go ahead and install our second pin in the tensioner block. And again, we're only going to go halfway. And we'll go ahead and screw it together. I just want to hold this into position. Grab your screwdriver and screw it in until it reaches the plastic. And we want to put it in the same distance that we did the other one. And there it goes. Back it out a little bit. I feel like I moved it forward a little bit too much. There we go. Because we want to leave out enough of the tensioner pins so we can tighten these up if we need to. Okay, so now that we have that in place, I'm going to run this string through the tensioner pin. No pun intended. Okay, so here comes the fun part. Now we have to run this down through the tunnel for the last finger. And this could prove a little challenging, but just be patient. It will go. As long as your print is somewhat clean, you should be able to feed the string down through the tunnel. There it is. Okay. And again, we're going to go back down through the finger, between the fingertips, or the finger knuckles, actually, I should say. That should just go right through there. And then we'll flip our hand over, and you should see string coming through. There it is. Okay. Now we've got this through the tensioner pin, and now we have enough string here to tie our knots. So we'll go ahead and feed this through this side. Feed both of our strings all the way through. And as you can see, there we go. Now we just tie knots on these ends, and with this angle already set with the thumb and enough tension, we'll be able to adjust the tension to whatever we need. So let's go ahead and tie these two knots and get those glued up. And the same process as before. Let me make sure I get this one set up so we can tie our knots. What we're going to do is we're going to get both sets of knots set up, and then we are going to do the super gluing. So for this stage, again, we are going to make sure that we stay on that 30-degree angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this lifted in the air, like that, and that'll give me my 30 degrees. And then we'll go ahead and tie our knots. There we go. There's our first knot. So let's go ahead and finish this finger. And that'll provide the tension for the other fingers. So once we have this glued and set in place, then we can tie up the other knots. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's make sure this is nice and tight. And the easiest way to do this, again, is using the other string. And you're not going to break these strings, trust me. It's a 100-pound test line. So just pull both of these until they're nice and tight. I'm going to roll that knot around. We'll keep up our thing, and we'll go ahead and apply our super glue to the first knot, and we'll get that set. Again, you want to put a nice liberal amount and make sure you're touching the plastic a little bit there so it soaks into the nylon. Because you have multiple knots there. We'll get our accelerant in our little window here so we don't get glue or accelerant everywhere. We'll let that sit a second, and then we'll tie our last knot on that finger. Okay, that should be set. And it is. So let's go ahead and tie this last knot. Grab our tweezers. We'll pull a little of this line up. Make sure we tie a proper knot. Make sure we're at 30 degrees. There we go. There's our first knot, and this is going to finish off this set of fingers. And let's glue it. Grab our accelerant, our little window. There we go. Let that set, and those two fingers are done, and then we can finally string up the ring finger and the pinky finger, and then this will be finished. And then we can go ahead and install the foam padding and all the other needed bits. So this will take a second to dry. So let's go ahead and trim off our excess string. Go. And now we can string up the last two fingers. And we'll tighten up the thumb there, because that's definitely going to need a little bit more tension. We did the perfect tensioning on the index finger and middle finger, which gave us a little bit of slack on our thumb. We can pull that slack out with the tensioner block. And that's what they're designed to do. So now we have proper tension on all strings. And we have a full range of movement. So let's go ahead and string up the last two fingers, and that'll complete the tensioning and the stringing of the fingers. So let's do that real quick. Okay, so let's string up the last of the two fingers, and we've got our last length of 100-pound test line to run through. And we'll do this the same way. We're going to actually go through the process of running it through the top tunnel. We'll just push this on through till it clears the other side, and there it is. Let's grab our tweezers, pull this up, and put our tensioner pin in. And again, we don't want to put this all the way in. We'll just run this about halfway. We'll start our screw. Grab our screwdriver. Plastic, and this is going to make its own threads into the tensioner pin, so you'll feel it grab. There it is. And we don't want to put this all the way in. There we go. So for this one, actually, you know what? We will do that. We're going to thread all the way to the front, and as we turn, that's going to move that back a little bit. And on this one, since we're done with this one, we can go ahead and push this all the way to the edge. That provides all the tension. We've got our tensioner block, tensioner pin, and our first string. So let's go ahead and string that through. And then again, we do have to go through the tunnel to get to the other side. So we'll pull this string free. Just make sure we get this nice and wound up so we have a nice little flat, pointy section to get into that tunnel. Once we get it started, again, your tweezers are going to come in really handy on a lot of these stages of assembly. This one's proving to be a little bit challenging. It looks like we might have some fuzz in there, and I can see directly through, so it shouldn't be a problem to just push this string through. There it goes. There's our string. And let's go ahead and push the other one through, since these are proving to be a bit challenging. There's our other string. So we have our two strings, and they will go down the paths through the fingers. There we go. Now we just need to tie 2 knots on these and glue these up, and we're done with the tensioner strings. We've got all our tensioner strings in place. Now we just need to tie our knots and add our super glue, and we'll be all done with the tensioner strings. So let's go ahead and tie up our first knot. In the same method here, we're going to use the tension of both strings, actually the only string, and pull this nice and tight. So that should do it. Let's go ahead and finish this knot before we glue it. Pull this nice and tight before we glue it. Okay, that one is set. So let's go ahead and glue that. And grab our accelerator and our little screen so we don't get accelerator everywhere. Quick little spray. Set that aside. Let it dry for a second. Wipe up any excess that we see. That should take a second to dry. We can tie our final knot. Okay, so that is now cured. So let's go ahead and tie this final knot. Go ahead and glue it. Actually, I'll make sure we get enough of it on the knot. Grab our accelerator, our little cardboard template, quick little spritz. We'll let that set up, we'll trim off the excess, and now the tensioner strings are complete. The next stage is we're going to install the foam in the gauntlet and into the palm. We'll trace out our pattern for the 120% scale, and we'll insert our foam. And then our final thing we'll do is we'll insert the Velcro straps, and we'll get that all set up, and that'll wrap it up. So that'll take another second or so to dry, and then we'll trim off the excess. Now that that's set up, we can go ahead and trim off our excess strings. Flip the hand over. Let's make sure we wipe up any of that excess accelerant. And we can trim down our thumb a little bit more, being careful not to cut the actual tensioner string. And you can see that the tension is a little bit loose, so we can go ahead and tighten up those last two fingers so they match the other fingers. Just make sure we hold tight. Seems to be pretty even tension. We can actually give this one another turn. And there you go. All of our tensioner strings are installed and they're nice and tight. There's still a little bit of tension left, so if they need to tighten it up even more, we can do that. Everything is set up, so now what we'll do is we'll cut out the template for the palm foam, and we'll cut out, I already pre-cut the template for the gauntlet, and we'll insert those, and then we will put on our fingertips, and that will wrap up the Phoenix Unlimited Hand Assembly Guide. Okay, so we're at the final stage of the assembly of the Phoenix Unlimited Hand. In this part, we're going to install the foam padding. And it's really important that you use either medical grade non-latex foam padding or just non-latex foam padding. You don't want to use any kind of craft store padding. So the first thing you'll need to do is refer to the Enable the Future's instruction guide that I included in the links below. And in there are scaled out templates for all the foam padding, and each one of them is scaled in 5% increments, and we are using the 120% scale. Now I've already cut out the two pieces, and one of the things you're going to want to do is, as you can see, these are a little bit smaller and they're different shapes, is once you cut out the pattern, you're going to want to take your hand and make sure it fits in there the way you want it. So after you do a little bit of trimming and you've designed it the way you want, then cut your foam. Don't cut your foam and then make alterations. Make alterations to your templates first. So as you can see, I did a little bit of alterations for the first hand I assembled, and this one is actually much smaller. You can see that the curves are smaller because that's the piece that goes into the palm. The part that goes on the gauntlet, I thought I would do these little tabs, but once I finalized the actual fitting of it, I actually cut those tabs off. And this is the actual piece of foam from the original. I just pulled it out so I could show you guys how to install it on the one we're working on. So once you get your pattern set up on the correct scale for the hand that you printed, and you've cut out your patterns, you definitely want to test fit them, like I said. And then once you have them test fit to the exact size that fits perfectly, now I know it's a little bit difficult once you've assembled the hand to do the fitting for this. And as you can see, this is cut in a certain way that when it folds up, it kind of gives you this kind of impression. And I can show you in the finished hand that we have how that fits in. And it fits in there nice and snug. And there's an easy way and there's a hard way to do it. And I'm going to show you the easy way, the way I figured out, which is kind of folding it all up and then pushing it in there and then using your tools to finally fit it into place. But the first thing we need to do is cut these pieces out. So we have our patterns. I have some medical grade foam left. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut out the palm piece from the backing of the one that I actually installed, so we get a perfect fit because it was at 120% scale. And then, like I said, we're going to use the one from the previous print. So we'll get these out of the way, and we'll move our hand. And you just want to use a pencil. You don't need to use a pen or anything. So what you want to do is you want to match up the straightest edge of your template to the straight edge of the foam piece that you have. That way you don't have to cut a straight line. Plus you'll conserve as much material by putting it in a corner if you can. Now we don't want to cut it in here too close because this will be a difficult cut. We just want to have enough on there that we can cut it, and knowing that this is going to be waste anyway, this is a perfect lineup. So we'll just carefully press down on here, and what you want to do is you want to use a pencil on the backing part, not on the foam, because you don't want to leave any trace of marker or pencil or anything on the foam. And just take a mechanical pencil or a regular pencil and just trace around. It doesn't have to be perfect, but just get a general shape. And like I said, we're using the backing from the original one that we did. That way we have a perfect fit, and this is at 120% scale. So we'll just go around and carefully trace this pattern. And if you have to go back and change something with the pencil, it's easier than it would be drawing on the foam too. So, and using a pencil also, you can erase your mistakes if you slip your hand or move. Just make sure you get that right. Make sure we line it up over here, along the bottom. Okay, so we have our pattern, and it may not be easy to see on camera, but I can see it enough that I can trace around with a really sharp X-Acto knife. So now that we have our pattern traced, we'll grab our knife, and make sure you have a really sharp blade. And again, be careful tracing this, or be careful cutting this, because you don't want to cut your hands. And then just carefully go around and cut through and move in steady movements so you don't have any kind of breaks or cuts that are going to cause it to tear. Now, since we don't want to waste too much foam, we'll make sure we pierce all the way through the paper. I'm going to do this part carefully because I don't want to waste this extra piece of foam that I have. I'm going to make sure we grab our template again. Make sure we follow this around pretty good and see where that corner starts. Start our hole. Now you may have to go back around and do your final trimming to get the piece out, but at least you have your start. So you can just go back in and make sure that all these parts are cut. And you can clean up the foam afterwards with a Dremel tool if you want, but this is going to be folded up and slid inside the palm piece. And we do have a little bit of extra foam here, so if we need to do a smaller device for any reason, we have this piece, so it's always good to keep your scraps. So now that we have our two pieces cut out, we're going to do the installation into the prosthetic device. And we'll start with the gauntlet, which is the easiest. And this is pretty easy. Just peel off the backing. And you want to kind of curl it up. And if you've cut your template out perfectly, it should just fit in perfectly. And you can reposition this foam as long as you don't push it down permanently. So once you get it set in the place you want to go from the middle and then work your way up the sides, making sure you have full contact with the gauntlet. And again, you'll want to keep your backing because you can use this, maybe marker 120% scale on this so you know that this is the template for that size gauntlet. So now that we have that installed, and even if you, like I said, even if you get it off a little bit on the positioning, you can use a small Dremel tool or any kind of rotary tool to kind of trim off that edge there. So now the difficult part is putting the piece in here. And before we do that, let's just make sure we have all the little fuzzy pieces off. And let me explain how this is going to work. The easiest way to do this, now you're not going to tear the foam as long as you didn't make any deep gashes. Now that gash there might cause it to tear, so we'll be careful here. You crumple it up and slide it inside and then let it expand. So that's what we're going to do. So let's get the backing off. You just got to find a corner. And again, you want to keep your backings because these make great templates if you ever print 120% scale again. Now you want to try not to touch the sticky side too much, but you're going to have to put it in. Now that is the hard way, is leaving the gauntlet on here. The easy way is to take the gauntlet off and you can have it hanging there so you can get your hands in for this, and that's what we're going to do. So the easy way to do that is this will give you a little bit better access and it won't affect the tension on the strings as long as you're careful with it. So now we have our palm foam insert, and like I said, it's super tacky, so you just have to be careful. And what we're going to want to do is we're going to kind of fold this up, and we're going to use a little bit of its stickiness to help us get it into position. So what we'll do is we'll stick it on here, and we'll stick it on there, so it's already positioned in that way. And then we'll push down on like this. We'll make a little package that we're going to slide in there. Now I know it's super sticky, but just bear with me. So what you have to do is you have to make this as small as possible when it goes in there. So let's try it like that and like that. And the foam will unfold once it gets inside there, so you just have to kind of slide it in quick. And once it gets in there, you can maneuver it with your finger. Like I said, this is repositionable to a certain extent. So once you get it all the way inside, you can start to unfurl the adhesive from the other pieces. And it will come apart. You just have to take your time and be careful. And again, you're using 100-pound fishing test line, so it's not going to tear the line. So now, the difficult part is making sure that there's enough of it down inside that the recipient receiving the device has some comfort and protection from the PLA. And there's no big folds or creases inside. I got a little bit of a fold in there, so I'm going to try and pull that out. There we go. Okay. Now that we have both pieces of foam installed, we can put the pins and the wheels back on and attach the gauntlet. Again, you can trim some of this off with a very sharp X-Acto knife if you're worried about getting anywhere near the 100-pound test line, or you can use a small rotary tool. So let's reattach this. And then we'll attach our wheels. Okay, and there we go. So we have the foam pieces installed. So the final stage of the assembly of the Phoenix hand is to slide on our little rubber fingertips, our gel fingertips, and install our Velcro straps. So let's do that next. Okay, so the gel fingertips are pretty much self-explanatory. They're all the exact same size, so they just slide on the fingers just like this. And they add a little bit of protection for the string area where the super glue has been attached, and they also cover up the dental bands, which is nice, so it keeps them from falling out, especially in the fingertips. So as you can see, this adds a little bit of protection over the tensioner strings, and it also covers up the dental band. So we'll slide one of these on each finger. And you can slide these on with a little bit of strength too. You don't have to worry about tearing them because they are pretty durable. They're actually designed for human fingertips, so they should be very easy to work with. Okay, and then the thumb. Obviously the thumb is a little bit larger, but these are super flexible. Oops, that's upside down. So you want to make sure that the part that has the little ribbing here is the part that faces downward on the finger, because it's going to add a little bit of grip to the prosthetic device. Okay, so we have our fingertips installed and we have our foam padding installed. The last piece of the assembly, the last part of the assembly, is to install the Velcro straps. Okay, so if you bought the kit from 3D Universe, they come pre-made exactly to size, including the buckle, and they're very heavy duty. These are perfect. So for the installation, they're exactly the same for both the front and the back slots. What you want to do is you want to feed the strap in fuzzy side up through the gauntlet slot, and then you want to feed it through the buckle, and then back through the slot again, and there's plenty of room for it to go through. Pull this all the way through, and then you want to turn this buckle all the way up, so it's all the way up at the top there. And then you want to feed it again one more time through the gauntlet slot. And there is enough room, you're just going to have to push it through. Okay? And then feed it through the other side, and then that gives you your connection. Easy as that. So we'll do it again. We'll just deassemble the ones from the 3D Universe kit so you can see how it goes. Again, fuzzy side up, through the slot, back through the buckle, back through the slot. Make sure you pull the buckle all the way up. One more time through the buckle, or through the slot, not the buckle. Feed it through the other side, and there you have your connection. If you need extra slack, you just make sure it's pulled through all the way. There you go. So that finishes the assembly of the Phoenix Unlimited hand. To do an overview of what we assembled the fingers first, and then we attached the fingers to the palm. Once we had the fingers attached to the palm, we installed our dental bands. After we had our dental bands installed, we did our thermoforming for the gauntlet on our 3D printer's heated bed, and we installed the tensioner block and the tensioner pins, and we began the stringing of the tensioner wires through all the finger channels on both sides. Once we had those attached, we used super glue to make sure our knots were going to stay permanent. And then we tightened everything up using the tensioner screws. Once we finished that part, we installed our foam padding, and we installed our Velcro straps and our gel tips to finish off the Phoenix Unlimited hand from Team Unlimited. Well, that about wraps it up for the assembly of the Phoenix Unlimited hand from Team Unlimited. This is a really cool, fun project, and I hope you guys will print one of these out and assemble it yourself. Links for everything that we talked about during the assembly will be down in the description, along with where you can purchase the needed bits to finish your assembly. Again, this is a really fun project, and if you don't have a 3D printer, check out the ways you can donate to the cause in the description as well, and definitely check out the Enable the Future project website, which is also down in the description. Now, if you're going to submit this to the Enable the Future project to earn your badges for the assembly and fabricator, you're going to need to take a lot of pictures of it. You're going to want to shoot some video of the functionality of it. You're also going to want to discuss any issues that you had during the print, aspects of the print, including the layer height that you used, the infill, the type of filament, and the 3D printer that you used. Once you have all that information together, post a video up on YouTube as unlisted, and then you can submit it to the Enable the Future project. And I'll put that link down in the description as well. This is something really cool to participate in if you have a 3D printer. And like I said, if you don't have a 3D printer, there's other ways to help the Enable the Future project. I hope you guys found this episode interesting and informative, and if you're looking for ways to support the channel, check out those affiliate links and all the other ways you can support the channel down in the description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, comment, like, and share those videos, and I'll talk to you guys soon.